Por tu seguridad y la de todos, la Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec te invitan a colaborar con las siguientes medidas en caso de emergencia. Identifica las rutas de evacuación y las salidas de emergencia de este espacio. Mantén los accesos y rutas de evacuación despejados. Si estás acompañado
If you are accompanied with anyone, then coordinate a meeting point. This venue is free of trash and garbage, so please take it with you. In the evacuation routes, please remain calm. Remember to not run, not to push, and not to scream. Help the elderly, children, and pregnant women. Stay away from places that may be a danger to you or the people you're with. Cooperate with those in charge of safety. It's extremely important to pay attention to the instructions of the organizers of this event. Your cooperation and your remaining calm always will be very important for your safety. The Culture Ministry and Chapultepec Park thank you for your visit. By staying at this venue, I authorize the Ministry of Culture to use my photographs of me or videos of me to be used not for profit, but rather to disseminate activities on social media. Should I not authorize this, please approach one of the organizers to let them know. And this is based on the transparency guidelines and agreements and access to public information and protection of personal data. Thank you for your visit, and remember to follow Los Pinos on social media. We're going to begin in just a minute.
Bien, mesdames et messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin with this thematic session, so please take your seats. I am very honored, and also on behalf of the European Union, as a partner, one of the cooperative partners of UNESCO, to be asked to moderate this session on culture for sustainable development. It's the first thematic session of this afternoon. My name is Gauthier Mignot. I am the EU ambassador to Mexico. And we're going to begin without further ado because time is pressing. We have 7 speakers and then 4 observers who will then take the floor. And then this afternoon, there are 3 other sessions that will be taking place. So it's very important that we respect the times. That's 4 minutes for each speaker representing a member state and 2 minutes for each observer. So, ladies and gentlemen, once you hear a bell, that means you'll have 10 seconds to conclude, and you have the clock in front of you that can help you also. And I will also be watching the time, so I apologize beforehand if I'm going to be telling you to finish. But I do hope people will begin on time. So we're going to start right away with the speeches. And the first speaker is the Minister of Arts and Culture of Cameroon, Mr. Pierre Ismaël Bidung Mpat, to whom I give the floor. You have the floor. Mr. Ambassador of the European Union in Mexico, the moderator of this session, ladies and gentlemen, the heads of delegation, dear minister colleagues and participants, and the delegation of Cameroon, and we ask the moderator to please transfer or give our thanks to the Director General of UNESCO and to the Republic of Mexico or to the organizers of UNESCO and the organizers of Mondiacult for the invitation to our delegation, which is having a memorable success. I feel greatly honored to take the floor today in the name of Cameroon. Let us remember that this is the Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development of UNESCO, Mondiacult 2022. My speech is within the under the title of this session. So Cameroon is a Central African country with a multicultural mosaic, and we voted in a law in 1988 that raises culture to the level of pedagogical resources that impose a tailored approach and integrate cultural heritage into the educational system. It is about educating citizens rooted in their culture and open to the world. Climate change is a major concern for the government of Cameroon. The conservation of cultural natural heritage thus appears to be one of the solutions. Cameroon has opted for the creation of protected areas. This is the case of the Wildlife Biodiversity Reserve, the López National Park, the biosphere reserves at Dumbaré, Bubajida, Krikot, Korup, and Takamanda. Efforts are underway for the international recognition of some of these sites, although the challenge is to reconcile the urgency of their conservation and the imperative of development on appropriate actions to which our populations aspire. These initiatives can only have a positive, they have 2 objectives: to bring together the artists and to organize them into communities or into unions and other groups. For the President of Cameroon, who's the head of state, culture is the backbone of civilization and our people. And The arts and culture help with the development of a country, and this demands action at both the multilateral and bilateral levels. And we have a major objective in transforming subsectors and making our national richness into a vector, and by job creation through cultural and creative industries. And I remind you of this recommendation of UNESCO that the road that leads to development demands cultural. And this will be effective in the Cameroon. From 10 to 19 October 2022, the Cameroon hosts the events relating to the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the 1972 World Heritage Convention. This opportunity will allow experts from Central African countries and beyond to undertake a retrospective and prospective analysis on world heritage in Africa in the next 50 years. We will also have the youth, and in Yaoundé there will also be in October in 2022. And then we will also have an exhibit of sites, of heritage sites. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Minister, for your speech. And I will now give the word to Her Excellency, Madame Mariem Eunice Pleites-Quiñones, Minister of Culture of El Salvador. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Colleagues, ministers, heads of delegation, and representatives of UNESCO and the other organizations who are here with us. Today, UNESCO is convening us to this World Conference of Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development with the urgent need to examine our cultural policies and regulatory frameworks in such a way that these will become tools to strengthen the cultural sector, and especially that they will place mankind and their well-being at the crux of culture and all government actions. For the government of President Najib Bukele and the First Lady, our government planned culture for the first time is a cross-cutting axis for all of the policies whose main objective is to benefit our population. After decades in which our cultural sector had been abandoned, we now find ourselves facing a challenge of promoting a true process of change, which includes investment in our archaeological parks, including Joya de Serrano, which is a World Heritage, but also all the other archaeological parks and sites in our country. The construction of the new National Library, which is an investment of over 54 million, which is a product of cooperation. This new National Library aims to become the head of a national library network that will host in a modern building our bibliographic collections and the national archives, in other words, our history. El Salvador is investing in culture and in education as a bet on sustainability and a different way of thinking for the entire region. At this time, it's extremely important to re-encounter or to find ourselves again with a regulatory framework that must be reformed very soon. We will have a reform to the heritage protection law in El Salvador. We have the creative industry law, the film law or cinema law, the copyright law, and the creation of the Registry of Workers in Culture and Art, which very soon will generate an auxiliary account. Our programs have been changed a great deal since the start of administration. The transformation of the education in arts is offered free of charge by the ministry, and we also have programs for children. And there's also a decentralization or deconcentration of the agenda, so where the Ministry of Culture before wasn't able to reach. The consultations to reach this moment show the asymmetries from which El Salvador is not exempt. But if there's a conclusion that we can draw from the current global context, is that despite the fact that the sector is extremely vulnerable and fragile, we've shown the resilience, the power of cohesion, and also of being healthy. From this pair of culture and education, we see economic growth and also of taking up again the link with the importance of culture for humanity per se. Tourism, current tourism, proposes sustainable tourism for us and also for the rest of the world. The important thing and what we're proposing is to not move backward, but always move forward and to enable the population to demand more and more from us in terms of work, and assuming that culture is a right that everyone has. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Minister. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Tuomo Pumala, Vice Minister of Science and Culture of Finland. You have the floor.
Chairperson, colleagues, I want to express the sincere appreciation of Finland to the government of Mexico as well as to UNESCO for the organization of this World Conference. In our thinking, culture is not only an enabler and driver, but indeed also an integral part of sustainable development itself, and crucial for achieving the objectives of the 2030 Agenda as a whole. The seminal Global Sustainable Development Report 2019, prepared by independent scientists appointed by the UN Secretary General, observes that no country is yet convincingly able to meet a set of basic human needs at the globally sustainable level of resource use. When basically no UN member state will reach the SDGs, we absolutely have to understand why this is the case. What prevents their achievement? The scientists convincingly demonstrate the key issues and missing links. To put a long story short, it is all about transformation. Transformation toward production and consumption that does not exceed the planetary boundaries. Dear colleagues, what then is the role of culture in this transformation? Well, the first Mondiacult already replied when stating that it is culture that gives us the ability to reflect upon ourselves. Consequently, achieving sustainable transformation becomes, to a large extent, a cultural project. A project to imagine fulfilling and meaningful life within the planetary boundaries by way of conceiving and implementing cultural and cultural-related policies and measures as levers of transformation. In the EU, this work is ongoing. The recent EU expert group on a cultural dimension of sustainable development, co-chaired by Finland and Germany, and whose report was published just last week, developed actually 11 messages for Europe and from Europe. Messages that actually are universal and constitute action spaces and transformation pathways. Peace and security are essential, and Finland condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. And finally, Mr. Chairperson, Finland supports the adoption of the final declaration. We see it as a key global framework to make serious commitment and action beyond 2030 to solve the irrational underuse of cultural power for sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And now Guatemala will have the floor, represented by His Excellency Mr. Cristian Neftali Calderón Santizo, Vice Minister of Culture and Sports. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your attention, and a very warm hello from the Republic of Guatemala, a small country, but with a very great culture. 3,000 years of cultural richness, 25 national languages, 4 indigenous peoples, Incas, Carifonos, Ladinos, and of course the Maya. Today, currently with the Mayan calendar, we remember today, which is called Toc, the day on which we should reflect and be grateful and make up for our mistakes. I think that as public officials, we have the responsibility of making the best decisions and amend those errors from the past and foster the culture. In Guatemala, we believe in culture as a driver of development based on 3 pillars. Number 1, protecting the environment. Number 2, achieving social well-being. And number 3, of course, promote economic growth. I would like to tell you about a family called López, who live in the municipality of La Cintal, Retauleo, very close to our archaeological site of Tacalic Abajo, where coexist the Olmec and Maya cultures. Don Luis is devoted for the last 20 years to agriculture. He works on a coffee plantation, and Doña Mercedes is a housewife, and they both work very hard for a better future for their children. Thanks to the fact that because the Guatemalan government is investing $2.3 million in the building of the Museum Caracol del Tiempo, and thanks to the fact that UNESCO has received our dossier or our nomination to declare Catalic Tabas as a World Heritage, the future of the López family is about to change. Now, these children who will grow up will be able to work as guides at the park or in the museum, and Doña Mercedes will fulfill her dream thanks to the cultural tourism that will be coming of having a small restaurant. Culture is a driver of development if we join together communities, governments, and people. In addition, I'd like to tell you briefly the story of Don Enrique. He lives in the north of Guatemala, in Tetén. His grandparents told him that a long time ago, the Itzá civilization lived in that place, the last Mayan civilization, where they were also visited by Hernán Cortés. For years, Don Enrique has walked without knowing under archaeological structures, 400 buildings and 80 plazas or squares. And thanks to the government of Guatemala, with an investment of $6.5 million, the future of Don Enrique in the middle of the jungle is about to change. Guatemala, in truth, really believes in culture, and it's acting very strongly for this. And then there's Easter week. Easter week in Guatemala is very much in the very heart of us as an intangible heritage, and we've also nominated that for UNESCO to declare intangible heritage. And I'd like to conclude and say goodbye as the President of the Republic did so at the General Assembly at the United Nations, that may God bless all peoples, and especially may God bless Guatemala. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Now I will give the floor to Greece, represented by Madame Mina, the Minister of Culture and Sport.
Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, 40 years after 1982 Mondiacult Conference, which set the direction, standards, and frameworks for cultural policies in the past decades, the global landscapes have changed so much that UNESCO and the Member States need to reevaluate and adjust their common strategy in the face of current and future threats and opportunities. Over the past decades, the world has witnessed the emergence of new challenges in addition to those already present and intensifying. The need for drastic measures, among which comprehensive common plan for sustainable development is urgent and imperative, especially today, with an unjustified world that concerns not only Europe, but the whole planet. The contribution of culture and cultural sector is potentially crucial. Culture is a fundamental human right and a basic social good. In order to unlevel its full potential under the present and future conditions, the cultural sector is in need not just of a thorough review and adaptation of goals and priorities, or the deployment of forces, resources and means, but rather of a broader paradigm shift in development strategies and policies. Bolder, holistic and comprehensive strategies for the management of cultural resources that will overcome traditional barriers, achieve a dynamic synthesis of cultural heritage with contemporary culture, the creative industries, education, and new technologies as required. UNESCO core principles and values essential to long-term viability and sustainability of the cultural capital must also be upheld as a matter of individual and collective responsibility. These include cultural diversity and pluralism, together with the protection, preservation, and safeguarding of the tangible and intangible cultural capital for future generations against natural and human-induced threats, including those caused by the effects of climate change. Climate change affects every aspect of human activity and social structure. It also threatens tangible and intangible cultural heritage and the wider cultural environment and landscape. Besides physical integrity, the conceptual integrity of cultural heritage is also at risk, as the entire context in which heritage is created, experienced, interpreted, and understood gets undermined. There can be no adequate, effective, and viable strategy or policy for the long-term sustainable management and development of the material and immaterial assets of culture without integrated sustainable management, plans based on the holistic and balanced consideration and treatment of the natural and cultural environment. Preserving the authenticity, unity, and integrity of cultural heritage also entails jointly defending it against theft, looting, vandalism, and illicit trafficking and trade from both in times of peace and armed conflict. It also calls for coordinated international action for the return and restitution of unlawfully removed cultural property of its rightful owners or place of origin. This is of even greater significance when it comes to monuments of outstanding universal value, generally recognized as symbols of the very founding principles and common values shared by the members of the world civil society represented by the United Nations. The Parthenon, the UNESCO symbol, definitely constitutes the most prominent and emblematic case of a monument registered on UNESCO Heritage List whose unity and integrity can no longer be allowed to remain disrupted. My world-renowned predecessor, Melina Mercouri, demanded the restitution and reunification of Parthenon sculptures 40 years ago during Mondiacult in 1982. The reunification of Parthenon sculpture is not just a matter of justice. It is also a matter of very principles upon which UNESCO itself is founded. There cannot be dialogue between nations without dialogue amongst culture, something which proposes respect of the history, the heritage, and the identity of each nation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. And now, the floor is for Madame Gayane Umerova, Minister and Executive Director of Art and Culture Development Foundation of Uzbekistan. You have the floor.
Distinguished colleagues and guests, good afternoon. It is an honor to be here representing the Republic of Uzbekistan among peers from Cameroon, El Salvador, Finland, Guatemala, and Greece. I would like to thank all the organizers for this event for having us today. Before I move on to the topic of the session, let me tell you about the institution I have been managing and different activities we have initiated. Arts and Culture Development Foundation under the Cabinet of Ministers of Uzbekistan has been launched in 2017 to support the initiative of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan to develop and broaden all the aspects of arts and culture, architecture and education in the country, to set up a vision for the world culture cooperation. Our mission has been formed throughout the years, and it is still developing in the line with the needs of our country and international cultural scene. In this sense, since 2017, our vision and activities have been broadened, and now we consider sustainability as a key aspect of every project we initiate, and we believe that it can be achieved through our culture, support, and arts. However, the sustainability concept is a broad construct. It demands ranges from biology to arts, and it overlaps with the social responsibility in its focus on advancing the standard of living while also presenting natural and human resources. There is an increasing acknowledgement of the input of culture and arts into finding creative solutions for global changes. Both civil society and government stakeholders are beginning to appreciate the cross-facing nature of culture and consequently its value to sustainable development, environment, education, health, and social spheres. In 2021, we launched our first national pavilion in Venice, focusing our messages on the disappearance of the old historical neighborhood Mahala. The problem of urbanization and rural areas and increasing comfort in cities is affecting the historical district and old living areas. We always have been believed that Mahalas is not another case of traditional housing example. For us, it is more than architecture, building and bricks. For our nation, Mahala is a way of living, a way of passing our knowledge, belief and habits to the next generation and keeping the identity of our country safe. This was the first time we was able to attract so much attention to the social and economic problems throughout the means of culture and arts. Our broad research, which started in the exhibition project for Venice Biennial, gave us the opportunity to find the answers to many of our questions. As a result of this research, we launched a new project on the preservation of historical mahalas in Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. In partnership with UNESCO and other stakeholders, we are developing a complex and unique program focusing on restoration, preservation, and fragmentary conservation of historical mahalas. This is a pilot project that may later be extended to the other historical cities of Uzbekistan. 14 mahalas in Tashkent has been included in the World Heritage Tentative List of UNESCO. In partnership with the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, we are creating a design code for one of the oldest mahalas in the city called Namuna. It serves as a benchmark for future conservation and preservation of the parts of Tashkent. In 2023, we will be launching new initiative on resources and sustainability in architecture in Karapakistan, near the former RLC. The RLC crisis is the most prominent environmental problem in building the Silk Road and economic belt, which is mainly included by extensive exploration of the land resources in the RLC basin since the middle of the last century. We believe that our future project will become the largest initiative in the region, raising matters related to ecology, sustainability, resources, agriculture, environment, economy, and crisis management, not only in the region of the RLC, but also to the worldwide growing issue of resource management. This project will focus on resources with a wide use of sustainable architecture, new materials, energy, earth, and soil. It is a showpiece, especially the commissioned organic farm, that combines contemporary technology and practices with the traditional method of planting. The farm will become a site of exchange, creation, and embracing the dialogue between different scholars, artists, architects, and many others who will be able to cooperate throughout the year. It is designed as a multidisciplinary platform where all the researchers will be able to find their tools for new discoveries. Particularly considering that Karapakistan has many rural areas, we believe that it will be relevant to begin the work on obtaining regional solutions for the ecology of that region. I would like to take this opportunity to invite those who care about these issues and would like to raise this awareness on the topic to collaborate. We are open to new partnership opportunities and exchange of our ideas in this theme and welcome further ideas. I hope this forum will open many opportunities for cooperation along with providing new insight into different fields and culture of creative sector. To conclude, let me wish to organizers and participants of Mondiacult great success in building the world to the Mexico and building the brighter future with a concrete action to the new generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Our last speaker will be from Guinea. He will just be joining us at the very end of the session. So meanwhile, we will give the floor to the observers who will come by turns to the microphone here. And first, as a first observer, the representative of the Arab League Educational, Cultural and Scientific Organization, Professor Mohamed Ould Amar, Director General, and you have 2 minutes.
الجلسة أصحاب المعالي الجمع الكريم مساء الخير باسم معالي المدير.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Dr. Mohamed Ould Amar, the Executive Director of Hani bin Muqbil from Saudi Arabia, we will present to you our greetings. Among the recommendations of the Arab Group, 2 proposals I would like to emphasize their importance. The first, incorporating culture as a main constituent in the maintenance of international peace in the framework of the United Nations organization, so that culture will take its central role in peacemaking throughout the world. Second, making use of the capacity of culture derived from climate changes and the collective efforts to save our globe. We would like to acknowledge the project of Saudi Arabia, Green Future, which coordinates among the Arab states to depend on culture as a sustainable source to promote human dialogue and future generations, and to face up to climate change and to deal with environmental pollution, which increase its intensity. We are committed to international efforts to protect the planet by facing up to the climate change as part of our national and regional curricula. For the 23rd ministerial meeting in December in Saudi Arabia, so that international organizations and the Arabs will meet to discuss an important topic, culture and green future. We have to come together for man and only for humanity. Thank you to all.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much. And now we will go on to the intervention of the second observer. It's a taped video message from the Commissioner for International Partnerships of the INTPA European Commission, Ms. Jutta Urpilay.
Empowers women and young people to find their voices. It increases shared understanding that leads to solutions and action. But culture is also an important source of income for local economies. Creative industries provide youth future opportunities. Now new trends are reshaping culture. I welcome the opportunity today to reflect on how to develop sustainable and inclusive policies. The EU represents unity in diversity, including cultural diversity. It is a principle we hold dear. As a signatory of the Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, we support cultural policies promoting peace, democracy, and respect of fundamental rights. our decision to invest an additional 5 million euros into the EU UNESCO expert facility on the governance of culture shows our firm commitment. This program has already supported 20 countries implement policies that put culture and cultural diversity at the center of sustainable development. The additional funding will allow us to support many more countries in the coming years. Friends, together we can ensure that culture contributes to a sustainable, inclusive and prosperous future for all.
J'appelle maintenant ici au micro.
I would ask Madame Celia Fischer, Secretary General of the International Music Council, to kindly take the floor. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with no explicit focus on culture in the UN 2030 agenda, opportunities to mobilize the culture sector to draw on its reach, its insights, and its energy to accelerate development are being missed. Yet, such mobilization is all the more essential given the long and difficult road left to travel to achieve the SDGs. In the short term, this passes through closer engagement of the cultural sector in policy planning and implementation. Yet, in the longer term, only an explicit culture goal agreed at the highest level can deliver the profile and focus needed. With the halfway point in the 2030 agenda right on our doorstep and key UN meetings in 2023, which are likely to shape the run-up to the post-2030 agenda, it is time to reflect on what a culture goal could look like. The International Music Council is the world's largest network of music organizations and institutions dedicated to the achievement of essential music rights for all. We have joined, together with other global cultural networks, a campaign that is called the Culture 2030 Goal Campaign. And 3 days ago, we launched a zero draft of a potential future development goal focused on culture, which we entitled "To ensure cultural sustainability for the well-being of all." We need a dedicated goal for culture for 5 main reasons. First, to ensure adequate focus on culture at the highest level of government. Second, to ensure that the range of connections between culture and other policy areas are fully accounted for. Third, to ensure that the culture sector itself feels a sense of engagement and ownership of the goals. Fourth, to ensure that all other goals are activated and that their achievement is strengthened through the mobilization of culture. And last but not least, to ensure that the achievements of all goals can be protected from systemic and behavioral barriers that can be addressed through a cultural lens. It has filled us with excitement to hear the Honorable Minister of Culture of Mexico and many others over the past 2 days to call for such a specific goal for culture in its own right. We look forward to engaging the dialogue, and we also hope that many governments will accept to be champions on our joint journey towards an SDG for culture. Thank you.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Fisher. And we would give the floor now to the representative of Culture for Causes Network, Mr. Mendez. You have the floor, sir. Mr. Mendez, you have the floor.
Dear ministers and vice ministers of dear UNESCO representatives, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Edson Armando. I am the director of La Casa del Mendrugo Museum and the official representative of Culture for Causes Network, a French non-profit organization merely known for the organization of Museums Week, an event supported by UNESCO since 2016 that gathered more than 6,000 galleries, libraries, archives, and museums from all over the world on social media to address topics of general interest. For many years, we have encouraged our community to publish digital content and engage audience to the topic of the environment and the sustainable development in order to contribute the overall effort to raise public awareness. This year, I have the privilege and honor to announce officially at Mondiacult 2022 in my native country in front of so many distinguished personalities that Culture for Causes Network will organize an NFTs exhibition at UNESCO headquarters on the theme on the reconciliation with the living, on the occasion on the Earth University, November 25-26. A virtual gallery will host so many artworks and sales will abound a UNESCO Biodiversity Fund. For all your information, just to have a launch, a call to green activism to our community. Why NFTs, will you ask? One, because it's a new way for artists to express themselves, to expose audience to their perception of the world, and to gain an international exposure, and to find new ways to sell their art. Two, because we deeply believed that the crypto art ecosystem must be made more and more aware of the environmental issues. We would be honored if you could help amplify our call to green activism. All the informatives are available on museumsweek.org. Thank you very much for your time. Sigan disfrutando su estadía en México.
Continue to enjoy your stay in Mexico.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. This closes the list of the interventions of our observers, but our last ministerial speaker has joined us. This is Mr. Alpha Suma, Minister of Culture, Tourism, and Handicrafts of Guinea. You have the floor, Minister. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers of culture, colleagues, participants, distinguished guests, allow me to begin my remarks by addressing to all participants the fraternal greetings of the people of Guinea and of the Guinean government. Ladies and gentlemen, my modest words would tell you of the interest that my government has in cultural policies here at this conference, and of our interest in making our cultures a true vector of wealth, together with international mechanisms, with exchanges, complementarity in view of different challenges that we find in these days. The topic of this session, Culture for Sustainable Development, is quite evoking. In other words, it expresses the entire importance of this within human development, protection of cultural and biological diversity, and viability of ecosystems that are so very fragile. Indeed, since the historical conference of Mondiacult here in Mexico City 40 years ago, the importance of culture was sufficiently underscored given the public meetings on this topic, economic developments import, which is so very of the utmost importance in that sense. Our government is also committed and willing to implement all of the international solutions relative to the adoption and implementation of cultural policies, as well as the international cultural conventions that it has ratified. Aware of the relationship between cultural diversity and biodiversity, of the knowledge, of the Aboriginal knowledge in terms of the environment, our country, in collaboration with its partnerships, at the bilateral and multilateral level, has implemented a set of administrative and legal measures so as to favor social inclusion, protection of the environmental ecosystems, etc. In this sense, I'll mention just a few. The preparation of the new cultural policy documents in November 2016, the adoption and enactment of the law on the protection and conservation and implementation of the national cultural heritage, the adoption and enaction of literary property and artistic property in the country in 2019. In addition, we have just tied the buckle on this on signing a protocol of agreement for that effect. Implementation in the arts and culture, cinema, video, photography, the culture, tourism is now taken into account in our National Development Plan and in the sector as an important, sector for economic development. Implementation of a national service for cultural and creative industries. Right now, the department that I head up is working on implementation on a framework project for the cultural sector in partnership with the United Nations, with the UNDP. Right now, the adoption of a specific law on the status of artists in their cultural industries. Ladies and gentlemen, these efforts at the level of the state imply certain challenges, conflicts, the reduction of social inequality, and the needs of a very young and demanding population, and capitalizing the opportunities and innovations at the technical and digital level. Because of all of this, we states need to make the most of the UN system and together with the private sector and civil society to reinforce our cooperation to promote and protect our cultures. Finally, I would like to reaffirm the commitment of my authorities to implement all of the recommendations of the World Heritage Fund, as well as our work with Côte d'Ivoire for Mondiacult on the list of World Heritage sites that are endangered. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great hope that I close my words by wishing every success in this conference with a respectful respect for the culture of peace and sustainable development. Long live peace, sustainable development, long live international cooperation. Thank you ever so much.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. That was the last person to take the floor in this session. I believe we've had an extremely diverse session with countries in different situations on 4 different continents, all of whom share the conviction that cultural policies can contribute to undertaking the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that we all share, and beyond 2030. This requires a global reflection, as the one that has just been undertaken in the European Union, but also at the local level with individual experiences such as those that several ministers have presented to us today. And I believe this also shows the importance of UNESCO's role as a vector for cooperation and support. And on the European Union side, where for about 10 years we've been developing together with UNESCO funding for about 30 projects that benefit about 60 countries. You can count on the continued support and engagement of the European Union, as was just mentioned in terms of a €5 billion contribution to funding in these senses. And this is likewise what's being done by our 27 member states. Thank you to all member states for your words, observers, as well as for your discipline in keeping within the time limits. You allowed me a few minutes to sum up our words and give time to the next panel to come forward. Thank you as well for the interpreters. Thank you to UNESCO for organizing this wonderful conference, and thank you, Mexico, for hosting the conference as well.